So without much ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Maria Maricel S. Ibita.
Thank you, Sir Jonald. It's my pleasure to be here, even if it is just in Cubao, but I'm really glad to be invited to the Holy Angel University. It's a pity that we cannot be together on site, but the reason why we are not together is something that we will talk about today. So let me begin, and from time to time I will be asking you questions, and I hope that you will give us some of your insights. Okay, so I understand that most of you are new in theology. I would just like to maybe underline that this is already very different from Christian values education. Theology is something that is more critical. It is also academic. At the same time, it is also very practical. It is practical in the sense that theologizing, the manner of doing theology, is practiced even in simple matters or in more complex way to understand our world. So let me begin right now by sharing my screen. Okay. All right. So I hope that you can already see my screen. Let me just go to slideshow. So it's bigger for you to see the materials. So the title that we have for today is Robs to Riches. Reading Luke 19:11-28 today, or in contemporary times. This theme is like thought about because of the topic that was given to me on Faith Forward, why the Bible still matters, or does it really matter? So, for today, our task is to explore the enduring relevance of the Bible in the contemporary society, to encourage you, college students, to critically engage with its teaching and understand its historical and cultural significance, and also to reflect on its role in shaping personal faith, ethical decision making, and community values in a modern and diverse world. So, what do you expect to learn, or maybe unlearn, or relearn today? Maybe you have already been, your imagination or interest has been picked by what is this 5P. So, let's try for the moment. Meanwhile, I would like you to already type on our chat box, what are the things that intrigue you for today? As we have already mentioned, especially during the pandemic, we have often hear about the word VUCA. And VUCA word is actually a military term, which means volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. It was used around the 70s, 80s, something like that, when the Western world and the communist world of then USSR, they are somehow like falling apart, especially the communist world. And because of that, the Western world wasn't so sure anymore. So who is our enemy? Before, it's just, the enemy is well known, but now there's just a lot of gray areas. Uh, the background of this was like, for example, uh, the U.S. and Russia um, rivalry, political, military, etc. So before it, Russia was really like big, but then when the Russian Federation crumbled down, and more and more of their smaller countries or territories had their freedom. Of course, on the other side, whether maybe we can consider it as a triumph, but the other part of the West was finding it hard to see where are we going? Who's our enemy now? So that's why they call it volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. And this acronym VUCA has been used and reused and maybe overused during the pandemic time. Remember? I know that that's already like 5 years ago, but still we are very aware. We still remember and we sometimes still feel the effects and complexities of the COVID-19 pandemic. Having said that, for me, the word VUCA is still abstract. And I thought that maybe my friend Fernando Segovia's characterization of the world that we live in today is better or maybe more precise in its kind of the description of how we live today. So the first one is a post-global, okay? Post-global economics and government or politics that we see more and more marginalized people and communities. Another is post-human from the viewpoint of the ecological emergency, and post-national in terms of migration, having refugees, internal or external migration, etc. In 2016, Oxford Dictionaries introduced to us a well-known phenomena that we call as post-truth. We know this concept uh, when we hear the word misinformation, fake news, or the scams that we hear, or right now, this is even worsened by AI, like deep fakes, etc. The problem with post-truth is that right now, it also complicates and even endangers democratic processes and governance across the world. Finally, we have another P, and that would be our vulnerability to pandemic because of all these things that are happening to us, especially in terms of ecological integrity. We find ourselves humans as becoming more and more volatile, more and more exposed, more and more vulnerable to diseases that normally the animals, for example, just survive. So, for example, until now, we don't know where COVID came from. But also, more and more, we have the return of polio, we have the return of measles, etc., etc. Why? Because again of post-truth, the anti-vaxxers, etc. I think that the nursing students would know how dangerous it is for our children not to receive the vaccine. And the COVID-19 pandemic has really worsened this and made a lot of our children very, very vulnerable to diseases. So what am I talking about? What I'm telling, what I'm doing is that I am trying to put us in this context of a world that is more and more VUCA, that is more and more piece. And in that case, do we really have some kind of significance? Is theology really necessary? What would be its important, and especially the scriptures? Is it really necessary that we study them? Why do you have Bible 101? Why do you have theology? So the outline of our presentation today is like this. So first, as you can see on the slide, I will briefly recall how come the Bible is considered as the soul of theology, or the scriptures as the soul of theology, as we see it in what we call as the pastoral cycle. Next, I will discuss the three worlds that a text, whether it is written, audio, or visual, may inhabit just for all of us to be familiar where we are coming from when we ask questions. The third is that I will be briefly also discuss the backdrop of the three words of the text of the Gospel of Luke, the context and the genre or literary form, the narrative that we find in the parable, and how or what kind of alternative insights will we gather when we read it from an ecolonial or sustainability lens. What does it even mean? Finally, we will try to see what would be the implications, the challenges that our biblical ecolonial sustainability reading pose or ask of us today. So let's try to start. I have already mentioned that the scriptures is considered the soul of theology. So meaning to say, let me just maybe remove this so you can see some of the, yeah. Okay. So the Bible permeates and sustains every aspect of our theological work. Our thoughts, our words, our behavior. The scripture is supposed to help us to be grounded in God's revealed truth. And in this screen, you will see that we have the combination of what we call as the theological process or the pastoral cycle of see, judge, act. And we will combine that with a sociological, more hiyang approach for the Philippines. And let me explain or expound on that. Why is this important? This understanding theology and practicing theology could be done differently. But for me, the pastoral cycle is one way of very practically practicing, deepening, and understanding the world around us from a theological lens. So let's start. The first one is to see. Let me just remove this. I am bothered by this. Let me remove this floating meeting control. Okay, good. So we have what we call as see or sense. What do we mean by that? To sense is to that kind of feeling that you usually go through when you maybe the first time that you entered your classroom. So you kind of become aware of your sense of feeling. Ang ginaw ba ng aircon? Or maybe you would also say that, I am smelling something. Parang ang sarap na sisig. Right? Or sometimes you would see people, parang hindi ko kilala yun. So, all the senses that we have are involved in the seeing or in the sensing. So, this is somehow an important part of theologizing, being aware of our human experience. So, we call it pakiramdaman. Now, the next part of our theologizing is what we call as judging. Okay, so we have judging, meaning to say we try to understand. We try to understand what is going on. Sometimes we do this by informally. We do usap-usapan or kwento-kwentuhan, kasulatan. By the way, I am also a nurse by profession. So, kwentuhan is when you ask like, kumusta po kayo to the pasyente? Ano pong nararamdaman nyo? And then you begin to think, what are the possible signs and symptoms? And also, what would be the possible illnesses that maybe the person is experiencing? So, usap-usapan, kwento-kwentuhan, and theologically speaking, academically speaking, we do this through our social analysis. Okay, so and in the social analysis, we use various data, sociological, economics, politics, etc., etc. So the exact sciences like biology, like about the climate, or maybe something about engineering, or maybe I like how what I see earlier. It's the something on criminology. I think that's the one that I saw, and maybe also the one on uh the training for the stewardess, for those flight attendants, etc. So you try to understand what's going on. But because it's a theological process, this is the first thing that we have the importance or the significance of the scriptures and also of the theological concepts. Okay? So that is judging, usap-usapan, kwentuhan. This is our being marites. And it's only after we have gathered all the information that we try to make a judgment, that we try to discern the course of action that we will have. So again, for the nursing people or those in the biomedical sciences, when we have gathered the materials, that's when you would know what kind of plan will we have. After all the laboratories, you have identified the diseases, that's when you will know what are the management that we will do. In terms of criminology, for example, you have gathered the data, you have gathered the statements of the witnesses, and then you try to piece together what should be done next. Who are the people that you need to pursue, or uh, what kind of offices that you need to consult with, etc., etc. Okay? So that would be our acting or the kilos damay. Because it is a well-discerned process, then you are more effective in carrying it out. But we don't stop there. So the See Judge Act is usually what we find in the basic Christian communities. But its usage throughout the world, especially in Latin America and also here in Asia, we have also added what we call as evaluate. So this is where you have your pagninilay or pagtatasa, your assessment of the actions that you have done. So for example, did I succeed in my management of the illness? Bumaba na ba yung lagnat? Or maybe we could say that, oh, this lead that we have in terms of this crime, we are already going to the next kind of possible clue. So once again, we try to use here our five senses. We open ourselves to the feedback as to what are our best practices, or maybe the limitations that we have. And we try to somehow adjust ourselves. And then finally, we also again use the scriptures in celebration or ritualization. Usually, the Latin Americans, they would end with celebration. But since the pandemic, me and my twin sister noticed that we cannot always celebrate. As Pinoys, we are always happy, di ba? We are always resilient. But until when? We also need to recognize that sometimes, sabi nga last week, kapag puno na ang salok, when the measuring cup or the measuring item is already full, what do you do? So it's important to celebrate, yet it's also important sometimes to symbolically express our complaints, our sumbong, our tampo to God. Okay? So, as you can see, in this way or manner of theologizing, we aspire for social, personal, and communal transformation. Okay? So it's towards liberation and transformation. So again, we call it the pastoral cycle or enhanced pastoral cycle. Sometimes me and my sister only just call it Teolo, hiyang. Okay, so that it is hiyang as well for us Filipinos. Now, let's move on. What do we mean by the three words of the text? The three words of the text, or employing the Bible in the pastoral cycle, as you have already seen, at least for me, fulfills the four aspects of biblical interpretation. So biblical interpretation is not neutral. It is not always objective. The mere fact that, as you can maybe usually we see when we are in Zoom, we see our little boxes there, right? So we have different viewpoints. We are coming from different perspectives. We are coming from different areas. And therefore, it's very important that we know our context. In the same manner, the Bible as well, it has its own context. And sometimes the layers of edition of the writing and rewriting, they have different contexts. In the same manner that Christian or Catholic social teachings, for example, or even the CBCP pastoral letter, they have their own context. So, for example, just recently, last September 21, in light of the flood control controversy that we have right now, we have a CBCP letter that talks about how do we address that. So it's something that is very unique to our situation because this is our context today. The second is how do we be the aspect of an integrated way of reading the text. What do we mean integrated? That it affects our thoughts, our feelings, our behavior. And this is the reason why, especially for Ignatian spirituality, if I may add, it's very significant to ask yourself, how do I feel today? I guess one of the good things that came out of the pandemic is when we check in with each other, that right now mental health is not a taboo anymore, but it's something that we can talk about. Biblical interpretation should also be inclusive, meaning to say it should be the table of our dialogue should be extended and extended. It should not marginalize any member of our human or the whole creation community. I will tell you about that a little bit more later. And then, of course, if it's contextual, if it's integrated, and if it is inclusive, then we can aspire for a reading of the Bible, for a theologizing that is transformational. Now, as you can see the arrow here, the green arrow, all of these aspects is something, they are something that I relate and what I call as the McKenna questions. The McKenna questions is just something that I invented just because these questions usually are used by Megan McKenna. She's a storyteller and theologian, and she used to come here to the Philippines. When she talks or retells the story, for example, of the Gospels, she would only ask three things. How do you feel? What is true or false in the text? And what is disturbing in the text? How do you feel about the text? To personalize it and to allow us to name the situation where we are in, our context. And then what is true or false in the text is to allow us to see the universal character of the text or of the story. What is disturbing about the text is somehow the key, the gateway to our critical evaluation of a certain text. And when I say text, it's not just the biblical text. It could also be other authoritative texts like the Philippine Constitution, the human rights, or maybe, for example, the executive order of the president. But we could also use them in terms of a movie that we have seen, for example, or maybe a song that we have heard, or maybe a social media post that we encountered. So for me, it's a very, very they are basic questions, but they allow us to be more conscious of what we are consuming and also what we share. Okay, so let's continue. Now, when we have already asked those questions, how do we feel? What's true? What is false? Or what is disturbing? Then we can try to ask ourselves, what are the questions or what type of questions can we ask the text? Or what type of questions do we generally ask? Whenever we have a text, which could be any kind of text, we need to remember that it comes from three worlds. The world behind the text, which means what's the history of that? The second is the world of the text, what it is saying, what do you read in it? Or the world before the text, what is the relevance of that particular text? Let me give you a little bit more of an example. Maybe I will stop share for a while because I would like to see some hands. Who among you likes Star Wars? Can you give me maybe a thumbs up? Let's just see how many thumbs up will I get. Ooh, I could see some thumbs up. Okay, so we're talking about Star Wars. So the Star Wars, they said, has a world behind the text. What is the world behind the text of the Star Wars franchise? That it was set during the Vietnam War, and during the Vietnam War, so this is also the time of we are when we are confronted with the world before the text, maybe we can ask, who are the Palpatines today? Who are the Luke Skywalker? Or sometimes, for example, do you feel like you are Princess Leia? Or do you feel like Rey, the new Skywalker? So all the texts that we receive or that we encounter, they have what we call as the world behind the text, the world of the text, and the world in front or the world before the text. Now, how about the scriptures? Let's return to our PowerPoint. Okay. I hope that you can see it. Okay. So, as you can see here, we have a lot of ways of interpreting the text. You can see the text here in the middle, and somehow it encompasses a world behind, a world of the text, and the world before the text. When we talk about the world behind the text, there are many ways of interpreting it. Like, for example, some scholars would take a look at the Hebrew or the Greek, the original languages. But they will also try to ask, oh, who or when was it written? For whom was it written? Sometimes part of the world behind the text is also, what kind of literary form is this? Is it a psalm? Is it a gospel? And in terms of, for example, the gospel, is it a story about baby Jesus? Is it a story about the crucifixion of Jesus? Is it a story about the resurrection of Jesus? Or is it a letter of St. Paul? So we call that genre or literary criticism. Tradition criticism is like the time stamp. So we could also see somehow the development of the text. And reduction criticism is when we have similar stories in the Bible, who copied from whom? Sino ang nangopya? And for what reason? So we call it reduction criticism. So those are the world behind the text. It's just like the anatomy of a chismis. You know, like for example, you found yourself becoming viral for tomorrow, for example, then you ask, why? What was it in the social media that was posted? Textual criticism. Who posted it? Source criticism. Maybe they are just joking naman. So that's genre criticism. And then you try to look at the time stamp. I already addressed that. It was just a joke from my friend. Okay? But then you also ask, but why did that person post post it again? So reduction criticism. Historical critical method, text, source, it's also anti-scam. 'Di ba? In terms of banks, in terms of um how do you call it? Phone scams, like you receive a free like this, or maybe you won this kind of money. Banks would warn us, look at the source. Do not click. You have to investigate. Okay, so these are what we call as the historical critical method. Very, very important. Now, we also have, as you can see here in the blue, we have what we call as literary analysis. It is the world of the text. That's the one that we encounter. Usually, this is the gateway that we have, because this is the text itself that we have. That's the one that we read. The world behind the text would be about the author. It's like a window. The world of the text is like a mirror, because we can see it in, we can read it by itself, what it is telling us. But we also have what we call as the world before the text. These are what is also termed as contextual approaches. Contextual approaches just means, okay, you know the story of the Bible, you know where it come from. So what now? What is its relevance? What is it to the reader for today? And likewise, it asks, what does the text ask from us? Okay, so what it is that we can get from the text, and what it is that the text is asking us. And usually when we talk about what the text is asking from us, it is, what is the world or the planet or the creation community that God envisions for us. And when it comes to contextual approaches, there are already several that we have. Liberationist, meaning to say, because we believe that the God that we have in the scriptures is the God of Exodus, that's the God of Jesus, then by all means, God is about us living as free as we can be, as a people, as an individual. Feminist, as the name it says so, it talks about or looks for the women in the text. Where are the women here? What is the kind of role that they have? And then we also have what we call as post-colonial, meaning to say, are there other countries, for example, that conquer the people of God? Who are the empires, or what kind of empires do we have? Because sometimes it's also manifested in those stories. And then we also have ecological. What's the role of the non-human characters in the story? So all of these things somehow is also called right now as global systemic approach, or sometimes it's also venture on what we call as sustainability hermeneutics. Okay, so let's continue. Let's look at the Gospel of Luke, the world behind the text of the Gospel of Luke, the historical context and its literary form. When we talk about the historical context of the Gospel of Luke, what we try to see here is that there is what we call as the author by tradition, and an author that is detectable in the text. What's the difference? Usually, the author, by tradition, is affiliated or related with a disciple or an apostle. But the author that we can detect from the content is something that when you read the text as a story continuously, it's something that somehow you can pick up. Okay? So here in the Gospel of Luke, maybe by tradition, this is Dr. Luke, okay, always with the Apostle Paul. But when you read the text, it seems that this person is not Jewish, a Gentile. He's a convert. And because of the character of the Greek, the character of the original language, very learned. We also, of course, try to look at the date and place of writing. So maybe it could be in Greece or maybe in Syria. And already around 2 generations from the time of Jesus, around 70 or 80, 1945 years ago. But scholars also somehow detect that when you look at the whole story of the Gospel of Luke, it seems that the writer is addressing a wealthy community made up of Gentile Christians, so non-Jewish, in an urban setting, city living, but they are becoming complacent. They are chill only when it comes to their discipleship. And the author, the gospel writer, would like to encourage them. And therefore, he wrote and listened to and gathered materials and presented who is Jesus for our community. So meaning to say, when the Gospel of Luke was written, the gospel writer was not making a blog saying that, okay, you see, Jesus is here. He is already becoming, it's not like a news report. No, it's already a reflection of who Jesus is for them. And one of the ways that Luke, the Gospel of Luke, is famous for are parables. And parables are stories, but at its simplest, as C.H. Dad would say, the parable is a metaphor or a simile. Every time that you would see the word, the kingdom of heaven is like, that's a simile or a metaphor, like a description, a way of thinking of how could this kingdom of God be? Okay? It's usually taken from nature. So you'll see people, slaves, boss, you can also see sometimes seeds, you can also see soil. So it's taken from nature. Sheep or maybe pasaway na anak, they are all from nature. And they are told vividly. So with a lot of details, but disturbing details. So much so that you really wonder, is this really the meaning of the story? Or is this one of the meaning of the story? Because it has to tease us into active thought. So that's the world behind the text. Now let's go to the world of the text. And when we talk about the world of the text, we keep on our background the McKenna question. How do we feel about this parable? What is true in this parable, or what is disturbing in this parable? But I also would like you to teach you another important way or simple way of interpreting the biblical text and other texts for that matter. It's called characterization. Very simple. As you can see, we have 2 columns, we have 2 rows. First column is about words. Second column, about actions. Okay? So words and actions. But then we also have 2 rows. The first row is just about your focus character. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's always the bida. It could be even a lesser known character. But you have a focus character. First row. Second row would be, what do the other characters and even the narrator, what do they say about this focus character? And what do they do, either positively or negatively, to this specific character or focus character? Now, Is it difficult to do? Maybe not. Why? Because we do this every day. For example, we can ask ourselves, am I being true to myself? My words and actions, do they cohere? Are they united? Are they the same? In terms of your family or your friends, or maybe people that you follow on SOCMED, we could say that, are they really advocates for for creation? Are they really advocates for the climate action, like Greta Thunberg, for example? But we can also ask and level up our characterization every time that there is election time. Try to think of your politicians. Do their words match their actions? Kasi kapag hindi, patay tayo dyan. We're dead, right? You can also maybe apply it to the one. Is he or she really the one? Words and actions. To me, to my parents, to my friends, to those maybe who seems like does not matter, lesser character in our lives, how do these persons say, talk about with these people, or maybe how do this person respond to these other people, not just me? Or maybe that's the one that got away. Bakit siya naging totga? Kasi he or she is like this and like that sana. Kaya lang. Okay? So, characterization. Looking at our characters, the oneness of our words, and also of our actions. Now, let's pause for the moment. And here, I have the text that we will need to study for today. I think that somehow it's quite a lot of words. But I would maybe like to ask somebody to read it. For those who are listening or reading it silently, I would like you to put in your like subconscious, or at least in your consciousness or backdrop, how do you feel about the text, the story? What is true here and what is disturbing? And then we will try to characterize the nobleman and the slaves. Okay, so let's see. Can somebody volunteer to read the text? Can I have a hand? You can raise your hand so we can see and we can ask you to read it. Who can do that? Try natin? Who can do that?
Hello, Doc. I think someone is raising his hand.
Si Neo. Neo,
Me.
I'm gonna share my text and please read it for us, right? Let me do this.
Neo.
Sige po.
Neo. Wait, Neo, ha? I'm gonna... Okay. So, let me just do this. Let me remove the floating meeting control. Okay. So, Neo, please
Basahin
read
ko
it.
lang po.
Yes, please.
Okay, world of the text narrative. As they, Zacchaeus, his visitors, some enemies, were listening to this, he, Jesus, sorry ma'am, di ko po mabasa. Ito po.
Went on to tell a parable.
He went on to tell a parable because he was near Jerusalem, and because they supposed that the kingdom of God was to appear immediately. Verse 12, so he said, a noble man went to a distant country to get royal power for himself and then return. Verse 13, he summoned 10 of his slaves and gave them 10 pounds. And said to them, sorry, narinig po ako?
Oo, we can hear you. You don't need to read na the verses. Just read the story.
Okay po. So, 10 them 10 pounds and said to them, "Do business with these until I come back." But the citizens of his country hated him and sent a delegation after him, saying, "We do not want this man to rule over us." When he returned, having received royal power, he ordered those slaves to whom he had given the money to be summoned, so that he might find out what they had gained by trading. First came forward and said, "Lord, your pound has made 10 more pounds." He said to him, "Well done, good slave. Because you have been trustworthy in a very small thing, take charge of 10 cities." Then the second one came, saying, "Lord, your pound has made 5 pounds." He said to him, "And you rule over 5 cities." Then the other came, saying, "Lord, here's your pound. I wrapped it up in a piece of cloth, for I was afraid of you, because you are a harsh man. You take what you did not deposit and reap what you did not sow." He said to him, "I will judge you by your own words. You wicked slave, you knew, did you, that I was a harsh man, taking what I did not deposit and reaping what I did not sow? Why then did you not put my money into the bank? Then when I returned, I could have collected it with interest." He said to the bystanders, "Take the pound from him and give it to someone who has 10 pounds." And they said to him, "Lord, he has 10 pounds. I tell you, to all those who have more and will be given, but from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. But as for these enemies of mine who did not want me to be king over them, bring them to here and slaughter them in my presence." After he, Jesus, had said this, he went on ahead, going up to Jerusalem.
Very well. Thank you so much, Neo. Now, again, what we will be doing now is to characterize it. Normally, if, for example, we are in a classroom, I would like you to make a coloring book. What do I mean by coloring book? Well, we will try to color the whole text like this. So for example, the normal one, actually not black but white, because I made the background as black, so it should be like white. But all the red things that you see, they are what the nobleman would say or do. The blue ones, the first slave. The orange one, second slave. The underlined one would be the other slave. It's not slave number 3, but the other slave. And then we have like a flesh-colored one, the enemies. Okay, because we read earlier that the other citizens of the country, they really hated the nobleman. And then, of course, we have the bystanders. So when we could see this and we gather what are the words, for example, of the nobleman, and what are the actions of the nobleman, what kind of conclusion can we say about him? How about the first slave or the second slave or the other slave and the other characters? So let's try. So if I could characterize the nobleman, I just tried to remove all the other things here para magkasya sa laha, just so it would fit our screen. But somehow, a semi-conclusion on the words of the nobleman, sometimes called king or lord. The Lord here is like a small letter L, because in Greek, the word is kurie. Now, we could say that based on this red fonts, red descriptions of the words and actions of the nobleman, he says that trust in small things equals big responsibilities. So you have been faithful in 1 mina, you made it 10, you will be in charge of 10 cities. You were good with 5 minas, so 1:5, you'll also have 5 cities. And the nobleman also affirmed the other slaves' word. Remember, even the one who made just 1:1, he said, "You know what? You said that I'm a harsh man who take what I did not deposit or reap what I did not sow. You're very correct." So the nobleman is telling the other slave that, "But you know, you are wrong. You should just have put my money in the bank. So now at least I have some interest." So he knows the ways of economics. Okay, so he knows about the ROI, or the return of interest. But to the bystanders, when he dealt with the other slave, he said, take the pound from the other slave and give it to the one with 10 pounds already. So we could also see here that this person is very ruthless. Those with more will be given more. Those with nothing, even what they have will be taken away. And really here we have a cold-blooded murderer. Bring my enemies before me, those who don't want me to be their king, and slaughter them in my presence. So this is the nobleman. How about his actions? We have seen he's very proactive. He even went to get the royal title, royal power for himself. He gave money to his 10 slaves. Okay, we call it mina or pound. And when he received his royal power, he called the slaves and said, okay, accounting time. And then we could see that he's a very savvy business person, right? One slave with 10, one slave with 5, and then of course we have this other slave who just had the same money that he had. Now, let's take a little bit more, okay? What are the words or descriptions, the actions of the other actors, the other characters towards this noble person? Yes, he's very proactive. He got royal power for himself. It's also true. Very clever person. But did you notice? He's very good at passive income. He left diba? And then just before he leaves, he just distributed the money. So in his absence, okay, he is like an absentee landlord. He is still having passive income. But his own citizen hated him. We don't want this man to rule over us. But we could also see that actually the two slaves, they are goody-goody with him. First one, 1:10 in terms of interest. The second one is to 5 in terms of trading. But the other slave, again, as we have seen here, describes this nobleman as a harsh person, takes what he did not deposit, reap what he did not sow. And then the nobleman just affirm it. And then again, we see the bystanders saying, but Lord, he has already 10 pounds. Yet, the nobleman responded with a dire warning. Those who have more will be given to them. Those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken from them. And those enemies of mine who does not want me to be king, bring them here in my presence and kill them. Okay? So, as you can see, when we are doing characterization, we try to get into the deep. We are doing like an archaeology of the word. Let's try. Let's see what would be the actions. So again, from another power, we don't know where it came from, but he was bestowed with a royal power. And then the slaves, they came to him to receive the money, and they came also to him to present their trading result. Slave 1 followed his order to trade 1:10 result. Slave 2 followed his order 1:5 return of the interest. But the other slave did not follow his order. So this is the wicked slave. He just sought to keep the pound and return it to the nobleman. But the nobleman did not follow nor entertain what the bystander said about the punishment of taking the 1 pound or 1 mina in Greek to be given to the one who has 10 already. Now, question. This is a story told by Jesus. Who is Jesus here? Or who is the Lord here? How do you feel about this parable? Would Jesus be the nobleman or the other slave? Can I try to see what would be your act? What would be your conjecture? What would be your guess? Sige nga, let's see. I'm gonna stop share. Let's see. Let's read some of the comments that we have on the screen. So who is the Lord here? Or Who is this nobleman? Is it the Lord or it's just somebody, Lord? Is it Jesus? Is it God? What do you usually hear? Let's see. Let's read from the text. Nakikita ba natin? Would somebody at least share with us, who do you think is this nobleman representing? Di ba, a parable is like a metaphor. So who is this nobleman representing? Don't be shy. You know, maybe some others are already thinking about what you are saying. They are just embarrassed for the moment. Okay, I cannot, I don't know your name, but Tamayo would be,
Cedric.
Cedric. Okay,
Hello
Cedric,
po, good
please.
afternoon.
Hi.
Ayan, based from my own understanding lang po, for me, I think the nobleman represents Jesus, because parang it shows how Jesus entrust the servants, his followers, with the
Mhm.
resources before leaving to receive his kingdom and return as king. Ayun po, parang ganun po.
Very well. And you're right. Yay. This is usually the interpretation that we hear. And I would even share the screen again with you so you could see that this mindset, this idea is well documented and supported in terms of scholarly research. So let's see. Let me check. Let's hide the flow. Meeting control. Okay, so let's see. So, si Cedric, he is actually supported by a lot of scholars who would say that, this is a story that is parallel with Matthew. So, in the Gospel of Luke is the parable of the mina. In the Gospel of Matthew is the parable of the talent. Both of them are actually money. Money, money, money. So here we have, this is a story about the divine capitalist, the master who tests loyalty or unfaithfulness. This is a God who rewards stewardship and faithfulness, the one who sends people to missionary tasks, or maybe it's even a capital owner who lives by the rule of recognition of ability, equitable allocation of resources, expectation and performance appraisal of the stewardship of the assets. So that's the one that we usually hear from sermons and even maybe from our catechism. That's the easiest way to understand it, because Jesus was talking to them about the coming kingdom of God. Now let's try to look a little bit more deeply. But now you have already seen that Cedric got that viewpoint also from the way that we characterize the actors of the parable. Now, let's try to dig a little bit deeper and think about, could we gather some more materials from history and sociology, etc.? So let's try to look at the historical, sociocultural, and context of this parable and of the Gospel of Luke. Elizabeth Dowling would say that, it seems that the allusion to the absentee landlord, the master, is like one of the sons of Herod the Great, Herod Archelaus, who in 4 BCE was said to have gone to Rome to be crowned by the emperor, only to be petitioned by a Jewish delegation, his own compatriots, who also went to the emperor, the Caesar, to complain about the brutality of Archelaus. So, could there be a link to the parable with this historical context? So for Gertrude Tonsing, the sympathies of the listeners could have been with the third servant, just like those that were killed by Pilate. So we have Archelaus and we also have Pilate, who it's just easy for them to kill. So it means then that, could the master be a corrupt official? Hala! Tama ba yun? Now, that's the world behind the text. Let's now try to look, and also the empire, right? So we have the empire of the Caesar. We also have Herod as their political leader. The Herods, both of them were said to have been brutal. But then we also try to see how about the placement of the story within the whole gospel. Here, as you can see, saving faith again, this is the story of conversion, repentance, and restitution of Zacchaeus. You know Zacchaeus, the small guy who climbed the tree? He's also a tax collector, and he climbed the tree so he could see Jesus, and then Jesus told him, "Hey, Zacchaeus, baba ka dyan. Kakain ako sa bahay mo." And then, when Jesus was there, all the other tax collectors and sinners were there, and Zacchaeus said that, if I have defrauded somebody, I will give it back to them, maybe even times 4. Okay, so the conversion, repentance, and restitution of Zacchaeus. And then you have at the middle this parable. But then, after the parable, we have heard earlier that that would be the time that Jesus is going to Jerusalem later on to be crucified and killed. So what's happening here? We could say that we are going into the exciting part. Let's take a little bit more of look at the world behind. Now, thinking about the world of the text. Who is this nobleman? But now let us also try to look at the relevance of this reading for today. I could say that what Cedric is true, especially because we have already seen the placement, literary placement, but also because usually this kind of reading is placed towards at the end of November. And this is the near to the Feast of Christ the King. So therefore, in the Feast of Christ the King, we can immediately think that this is Jesus the King. But let's try to see what other way or what alternative insight can we also have when we look at it from what we call as the ecological, colonial, or empire and sustainability reading. Why do we have this kind of reading? It started in the year 2000 in Australia because of the worsening climate crisis. And our colleagues from Australia were wondering, what can the Bible teach us about the integrity and care for creation? And so they came up with what they call as the Earth Bible Project. And as you can see here, it's called ecological hermeneutics. What does it mean? It means readings from the perspective of the earth. Kumbaga, if the earth can talk, if the plants can talk, if the animals can talk, what will they tell us about our relationship with God and with them? So they came up with a set of 6 principles. We call them eco-justice principles. Why? Why is this important? Because in 1967, there's this historian who said that, you know what? The Christians, their idea of dominion in terms of nature, that's the root of what's happening in our ecology, in our environment right now, because they are so centered on people. So somehow, against this criticism and the backdrop of the ecological crisis, the Earth Bible Project say that, no, actually, when we read the scriptures, we can see that people and nature and God, they show us intrinsic worth, interconnectedness, and sometimes there's also the voice of the earth as a subject. Sometimes even the stones, even the leaves, the plants, they dance, they sing their praises to God. So they have voices. And not only that, we also see that there is a greater design where each one of the creation community, they have their place, where mutual custodianship or mutual care is actually practiced, is actually seen. And sometimes we could even hear them resisting against injustice. For example, um, remember the Moses and all the Israelites, the enslaved Israelites crossing through the divided sea, the sea becoming God's instrument as resistance against injustice. Okay, so this would be the maybe more contemporary systematization of what we call as ecological reading. The next one is Hilary Marlowe. He's from the UK, and for her, it's easy. Try to look at the text and just try to see or discern what would be the relationship between God and humans that is very special and unique without the animals or the plants. But also try to look at the relationship between these plants and animals without the humans. They also have relationship with God that is not dependent on the humans. And of course, we also have the relationship between the humans and the non-humans, but then they don't particularly care about if God is present or not. Okay? So here, what Hilary Marlowe is talking about, what she calls as ecological triangle, is underlining what are the understanding of non-human creation that we have. What are the kind of assumptions of relationship that we can ask from them? And what would be the effect of these relationships? So we call it the ecological triangle. So we already have the eco-justice principle, diba? And then now we have the ecological triangle. In my dissertation, what I just asked Hilary is, Hilary, if we have those different relationship between God and humans, humans and non-humans, and also God and the non-humans, but somehow, you know, they also have a dynamic in between them. And that's what I tried to see and to discern in the paper that I did, and in how I now interpret the biblical text. After my dissertation, we also have some colleagues from the North, you know, the Nordic colleagues. This would be the people of, do you want to be the snowman? Okay, so they are the Nordic people. This would be Frozen. Okay, and for them, especially Tina Nielsen and Anna Solevag, you know, it's very important that we look at the biblical text, but maybe we can also look at other texts, films, stories, etc. And maybe what we can use as principles would be what is called as the Earth Charter principles. Earth Charter is a kind of an organization of indigenous people, religious people, business people, politicians, etc., that values the respect and care for the community of life, of creation, integrity of ecology, socioeconomic justice, and democracy, non-violence, and peace. So for them, maybe we can also use this kind of lens in interpreting the biblical text. Now, Tina Nielsen even pushed for that. And she said that, you know what? There is a 2030, what we call as the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Because when you look at the Earth Chart, when we look at the Earth Charter, for example, it's still very abstract for her. But she said, when you would like to make it concrete, how do we see the kingdom of God right now? Could it be a kingdom where there is no poverty, where there's no hunger, there's good health and well-being, there's quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reduce inequalities, sustainable city, responsible consumption, actions for the climate, something that take note of the life below water, or also the life on land, and also very strong in trying to see and understand what would be the character of our institutions for today and how can we partner for these goals. So when we put together these things, the eco-justice principle, the relationship in the ecological triangle, the principles of the Earth Charter and also this sustainability goals of the United Nations, then somehow our group in Europe, we said that maybe we can call it a colonial sustainability or eco-sustainability kind of reading. So what do we mean by that? It means that we try to see how economics, justice or equity, what it is that we need, what it is that should be given to us, how the environment is affected by this, and how all of this fit into the vision of God. Maybe we can put them together. So sustainability goals and also what we have now called as Laudato Si goals. So we said that, okay, maybe we can develop this method and we can also try to employ it, use it in interpreting the biblical text. So let's try to see if we use this ecological empire studies, because of course it's the Roman Empire, and we also try to look at it from a sustainability perspective, looking at the story, remembering the story of this nobleman and the three slaves. What can we find? So it's very interesting that when we look at it from an economic perspective, the mina, it says, is a unit of weight of money that is equal to shekels. That would be in the Old Testament. But in the New Testament, it is a Greek money equal to 100 drachma or 1/60 of a talent. So as I said, the talent that we talk about in the New Testament, it's not the talent of singing, dancing, acting, etc. It's a unit of monetary measure. So, pag-usapan natin dito pera. So, the other day, I was thinking, paano kaya natin how can we approximate the amount of money that they had before with the amount of money that we have right now? And I came across this ancient money calculator. So, let's try to see and to calculate. Of course, this one is not peso-based, it's dollar-based, but more or less, we can imagine how much was given. How much is 1:10, 1:5, and 1:1. So you can see here that one Jewish mina here below is equal to 100 drachma, diba? That's the one that we have here also from the lexicon. But it says there that the calculator says that we will try to compare it with the per hour wage, sweldo, of a person in the US. So right now, for example, they pay $7.25, around 350 pesos. So what would be the measure or the value of one mina today? This is an approximation, huh? So here we have what I was surprised yesterday that it's gonna be 8,700 pala. So they were given this kind of money to trade. And 8,700 US dollars today is 495,500 pesos. So imagine, it's almost like the slaves were given 500,000 pesos. Kasi 500 na 4,500 na lang. It's already 500,000, diba? So they were given almost 500,000. Now, what happens? The slave one said that the mina that he had gave to the boss, the courier, the lord with a small l, it became from 495K, it became 4.9 million. Can you imagine? It's 4.9 million. Slave 2, of course, it's 4.9. Half of 4.9 would be around 2.5. But the other slave, still has 495,500. So what's happening here? Or maybe the question that we will have is, how can this happen? Now, di ba, we are trying to understand this from economics, equity, and environment perspective. In terms of equity, we are already wondering, saan nanggaling yung pera? What kind of trade would they have done? Now, let's try to look at the environment. In the New Testament, they have this idea, this concept that walang unli rice. There is no unlimited good. For them, there is only limited good. So it means to say then that if you have more, somebody has less. If you have taken 50%, then maybe if you are 5, then 4 of them would be only dividing the 50%. So as you can see here in the presentation of the world, people spending beyond their means, bank lending beyond their means, countries loaning beyond their means. The whole world has gone mad because they think that everything is unlimited. But as we all know, there is no only rice. Most of the goods valued by people in life are scarce, being derived from finite. So hindi siya infinite, walang forever materials through the expenditure of human labor and extrasomatic energy. Therefore, every time that we gain something, somebody is losing. Now, let's try to return. If we look at it from a scientific viewpoint right now, okay, because we are understanding this also from an ecological perspective, sustainability perspective, there is what we call as the overshoot day. What is the overshoot day? The overshoot day just means that this is the day when we, as people living in one planet, have already like reach the full potential that the earth can give. More than that, the earth cannot give it anymore. So the hashtag is we have to move the date. Why? So that we do not overshoot the limit of what the earth can give us. But right now, as the website for the overshoot day tells, if we are if everyone lived like a resident of the US, we will need 5 worlds, 5.5, as you can see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5 Earth. The Philippines, akala natin, we are okay because we are not so developed. But no, we already need 0.9, another Earth. If we continue the way that we are spending, the way that we are using our resources, the way that we are being wasteful. So what would be a more specific kind of example that we could learn? Let's take a look at the national budget. All of us are very aware of this, diba? So the national budget, this is the enacted budget already, the one that we are using already as dictated by the Constitution, the 1987 Constitution. Education should receive the most because education, our young people, they need it. Kabataan ang pag-asa ng bayan. But as you can see here, we also have the DPWH receiving 1 trillion. The others are, we are already looking at billions here. 300 plus billion, and then we have double digits billion. Sorry, I have to return. And then look at this. Health assistance is already like 2 digits billion. Also social protection, just 2 digits. So the only ones that we have would be a lot, would be education and DPWH. But it's not all, because even if these are the priority sectors, we also have this 3 figures in billion that we are paying in terms of the loans, in terms of the utang that we have. And most of them are also going to the DPWH because of the needed public works. But then, of course, as we know, tingnan nyo naman, this is the pattern of pillaging, of how can we corrupt the DPWH budget according to Senator Lacson. Para kay Senator Lacson, in terms of implementation, we only use up actually 40%. Yesterday, TV Patrol, Vince Hison was there in Pampanga. Seeing that actually the flood control is flood sira already. But look, 25% goes to the politician proponent. The DPWH received 10%, another 10% from the constructor, and then we have this parking fee that I am not so sure what this is all about. But still, even if I don't know what is parking fee, can you imagine that 25 plus 10 plus 10, that's already 45% loss to corruption, more than the implementation. And on top of that, as you can see here on the right, on the left side of the screen, we have kleptospirosis. When we have been infected by klepto, by stealing, by robbing us, and all of us are suffering from that. Right now, here in Quezon City, it's raining a lot. And the mere fact that we cannot be together, the mere fact that most of the towns and cities in Pampanga declared no face-to-face classes, we are all affected by the flood control. Diba? Ma'am, ano naman ang relasyon niyan sa ating reading? What would be its relation to our story of the Minas? Well, it's not so far-fetched. We remember that the kingship parable, you remember the noble person, is here, situated after not Lazarus, but Zacchaeus. And also Jesus going to Jerusalem to face the Roman Empire. Zacchaeus, even if he was an instrument of the empire because he's a tax collector, he converted, he repented, and he offered restitution. The tax collectors, they are most hated because nga the people before, they think that, if we can compare it, they are like the customs, they are like BIR, and they are also like the DPWH. So they see the institution as very corrupt. And somehow, we have also encountered this back and forth between the Cayetano brothers, maybe last week, in terms of what do we do? Do we just repent? Or as Lino Cayetano would say, let's not normalize corruption. Let's stop it. Let's fight it. So, if we take a look at the historical background of the empire, at the historical background of how much is a mina, and usually, where do you get that kind of interest rate? In loans. What's happening here? Is it really Jesus that we are encountering in the nobleman? The nobleman who said, to all those who have, more will be given. Those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. And for those enemies of mine who don't want me to be their king, bring them here and slaughter them in my presence. Is this the same character that we find in Jesus in the Gospel of Luke? At the beginning of his ministry in chapter 4, as you can see here, Jesus reads from the scroll of Isaiah, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He has anointed me to bring good news to the poor, sent me to proclaim release to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free. No more PDL, and to proclaim the year of the favor of the Lord." And when the people were waiting for his homily, when the people were waiting for his comment, what can you say about this passage? He just said, today this is already happening. So Jesus embodies all of this because the Spirit is upon him. And then at the end, as you can see, the words of Jesus on the cross, the Gospel of Luke. The first one is, "Father, forgive them. They do not know what they are doing. They do not know what they are doing crucifying me." They are actually afraid of seeing how they can become if they will truly embrace how to be in the image and likeness of God, how it is to be moved by the Spirit. And then another word of Jesus on the cross, to the criminal who was with him, I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. The word today in the Gospel of Luke is very important, because when Jesus would say today, it's really now na. Is the kingdom of God here? Now na. Okay, so it's today. So it's a very, very comforting word for the one who was crucified beside him. So again, very different from the character of the one of the nobleman who would say, kill them in my presence. And then at the end, as you can see, if Jesus begins his ministry with the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, it is the same Spirit that Jesus has given up at the end of his life, before the resurrection. Into your hands I commend my spirit, Father. So here we are confronted that if we actually look at the narrative, if we try to characterize the noble person, and if we try to characterize the slaves, and we try to compare it with the flow of the story, with the background of the Roman Empire, with the eye for economics, for equity, for the environment, and on the sense that what kind of God do we have here, maybe we will have an alternative insight as to who is the divine here in the story. So, what did you learn or unlearn or relearn today? How do you feel? What is true or false? Or what is disturbing? Let us check your let's check your chat box. So how do you feel? What is true in the story? And maybe what is disturbing in the story? Sige nga, let's see. Can I have some people who would like to volunteer so we can hear their voices? Voices. Wala pa, nag-iisip pa. Sige. So, if somehow we are thinking about it, then let me just share again. But just pay attention, okay? Just pay attention to these maybe new things that you have encountered. Okay, all right. And maybe we can try to conclude our study for today, our co-learning for today. What would be the implications? What would be our assignment? What would be the task that is before us today? In January 2015, we have seen Pope Francis coming over to the Philippines to be one with the people of Tacloban, because he has been longing to see them since 2013 when Yolanda struck. And what's fascinating here is that, at least for me, it's the first time that I have seen a Pope celebrating the Mass in a capote, in a raincoat. So all of them, pare-pareho sila, di ba? Look at that. It's like a shepherd smelling like that of the sheep. If we would sum up what we have learned for today, it would be somehow fair to say that maybe you have been introduced to the topics of how the society, economics, politics, ecology, sustainability conversation can be a part of our theologizing. See, judge, act, evaluate, and celebrate. So let us foster this kind of conversation. Let's keep on talking about it. Second, by employing what we call as the biblical, ecological, colonial, sustainability hermeneutics, we have tried to maybe more simply at least just look at the characters. What are the words and actions of the people that we see or read or encounter in the Bible. And let's try also to look behind them, to look at history, to look at other literary pieces, to look at and use, for example, our 1987 Philippine Constitution, our the Earth Charter, or maybe the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which, by the way, has a 2040 Filipino version. It is called, and that's gonna be your assignment, Ang Ambisyon Natin. Ambition with a play to ambition, and also our vision. So what it is that we envision for our country, for our communities, for our families, and for ourselves. And finally, let us be mindful, let us be docile, let us be open to the call for ecological sustainability conversion. Let us open ourselves to offer restitution and also foster, strengthen our spirituality as our grounding or roots in our concerted effort for climate action. So for today, we have looked at and maybe tried to see the parable of the mina from a new perspective. And maybe for you young people, it would be easier for you to echo the words of Vico Soto, our mayor of Pasig. He said, sabi nga, dati ang usong kwento from rags to riches. Ngayon daw ang uso na kwento from rags to riches. Remember that in a world where there is limited good, whenever you gain some, it means others already lost something. So nakakalungkot. Gawin nating hindi normal ang corruption. Gawin natin na yung mga istorya nila ay i-unfollow natin yung mga nepo baby kasi hindi siya nakaka-inspire. We need to stop it, just like the other slave. We cannot sustain a 1:100, 1:50 kind of return of investment. It's not sustainable. The earth cannot do it, and we also cannot do it. If we keep on spending like that, the more that we will be corrupt. And as the words of our dear Cardinal Ambo David would say, stolen wealth should be returned to the public coffers from which it was taken. Many of those implicated will not be impoverished by such reparation, yet the nation remains poor if the funds are not restored. We have to make corruption shameful again. We need to make corruption kadiri again. So maybe somehow it's a call for all of us. So somehow maybe let's try to ritualize before we open ourselves to questions and answers. I need 4 volunteers. Who can volunteer? I need 4 names. You will just read anyway. Can I have 4 volunteers? Hala, magtatawag na ako ng name. Okay, can we have 4 volunteers? Okay, first is Kurt, and then who will be the next? So si Kurt, and then I need another one. Who else would raise his or her hand? Let's see. So we have Kurt, and then Vince, and then Cedric again, and then another. Come on, ladies. We need you. Is there a lady in the house? So, Kurt, please read the first stanza, and then Vince, please read the second stanza. The third stanza, Cedric, please read it, and then maybe the fourth stanza, maybe just all of us together. So let me share my print screen again, and this is actually like poetry or a rap song. That if we have time, we can listen to it, or you can listen to it. It's composed of UP professor, her name is Cielo Magno. She has been part of the government. She's from the, I think, commission from the finance sector of the government, and right now she's very vocal in terms of how do we become responsible, how do we become vigilant in terms of good governance. So I don't see you right now, but you know the stanzas that you would need. So I think it's court first, and then afterwards we have two more, and then afterwards all of us will read together. So again, let me just remove this. Okay, Kurt, please read.
Wait lang pa, nag-loading pa.
Wait lang pa. Okay.
Yung Tagalog po ba, yung English?
Yung Tagalog. It's okay. The English is something that I tried because sometimes I also use it with my international students. So,
Ito pa, pagalitan ako dito.
Go, Kurt. Go, Kurt.
go,
Di naman
Kurt.
siya
Sige ba?
mag-anak. Okay lang.
I mean,
Kanta yan mo.
Baka mali masabi ko pa
it's a song.
Rap siya, rap.
Then you can just say T.
Oo nga.
I think
Nahiya na ako.
Professor Magno would be very happy. Okay, I will start. O, tax na ina mo, Kurt.
Bantayan mo, huwag hayaan, lustayin ng mga politiko. Yung perang yan, pinaghirapan mo, isusubo mo na lang, ninanakaw pa sa'yo.
Okay, the next one.
PhilHealth edukasyon, tunay na serbisyo, hindi mga ayuda pambili ng boto. Ang mga infrastruktura dapat paging mahawa. Pero projects na paepal mukha ang nakatapal. Confidential pork barrel ayuda, tax ng teka na sa pagkakasakit, kailangan sa politiko, ikaw ay ikaw.
Okay, the third one.
Ay ma'am, naka-cover po ng
Naka-cover.
gray yung...
Ay,
Ay, thank you
naka-cover ng gray?
Ay, okay na po.
Wait lang. Stop share ko muna. Because we will read it again. Wait lang ha. Sandali lamang. Wait lang, wait lang. So let's read the last paragraph. Okay, let me share again.
Okay.
Natawa kayo, nagulat kayo, no? Wait lang, I have to, okay. Let me share again. Righty. Okay, so the third one, nakikita niyo naman, diba?
Ay, nag-loading pa po.
Bata-bata, yes.
Sige ko. Okay po. Bata-bata di marunong magbasa. Ang mga politiko gusto yung mangmang sila. Nang bobola ng mambobola na niniwala ka, nakakapagod na, tama na ang dinastiya. Sa Diyos ang awa, sa tao ang gawa. Gawa ka ng gawa, pero bakit kaduka? Palayain ang sarili, di ka magsisisi. Kailan ka giginhawa ipaglaban ng hustisya?
Okay, together. Tax ng ina mo, bantayan mo. Huwag hayaang lustayin ng mga politiko. Yang perang yan, pinaghirapan mo, isusubo mo na lang, ninakaw pa sa'yo. So all together, tax ng ina mo, tax ng ama mo, tax nating lahat because every one of us, we pay our taxes. Now, kailangan ko ng boto nyo because it's already time check. It's already 3:25. But would you like to hear the song or watch the video?
Yes,
Give
yes.
me a thumbs up. Okay, so let's try to do this. So I'm gonna share you can look it up on YouTube. You can memorize it if you want. So it's here. Okay, I hope that you can hear it. Let's do this. So again, Professor Cielo is a teacher, is a professor of UP. Okay. Wait lang. Okay. Bakit siya hindi nag-play? Let me check. It should. Can you hear po the sound or not yet? Ito yung nakakatawa eh. When we use the technology, di ba? It saves us because it allows us to be together even if it is baha. See? Even the baha is not allowing us to be together. So let's try again. Come on. Wait lang, before. Sorry, I'm sorry for the technical glitch. Why? It's not. I'm so sorry for that.
Hello, Doc.
Yes.
Siguro
Ayun
po
na.
sa end ko, pwede ko po siyang i-play sa YouTube. Yun po bang music video na
Yeah, it's already here. Now it's
Okay po.
functioning. Hopefully,
Okay po. So
with...
kung hindi po siya mapwede, sa end ko na lang po siya i-play.
That would also be great. Let's
Okay
try.
po.
Oo, kasi anticlimactic, no? Okay, let's try. Do you have it? Do you have the music already? Is it already prepared? I'm sorry.
I have po in YouTube.
Oh, see, can you play it by YouTube?
Okay
Oh,
po.
at least now you know, ha? You can find it on YouTube. Yan. Thank you, sir.
Permission to share my screen po.
Yes po, of course, please. And I'm so sorry for the inconvenience. Ayan. Thank you, Sir Jonald. Sir, we don't have sound.
Hello po. Kita po ba?
Yes, Doc.
Doc John, it has no sound.
Di po tuloy kami makasayaw.
Doc, general yung sound.
You also share yung sound.
The audio, sir.
Ay, the audio. Sorry po. Wait lang.
Oo.
Share audio also. Ayan, ganun.
Oh, dun sa mga dun sa mga hindi nagbasa. Now, you can open your camera and we can jump together.
Ay, wait lang po. Inihingan po ako ng password ng Zoom to share the sound.
May last ma'am, may wait lang. Manya dyan password in Zoom, baka ta-play dito ang sound. Ka Sir Jonald.
Ayan.
Please, Sir Jonald. Maybe that's why I couldn't do that. Yan, Sir Jonald.
Ayun. Still po, hindi po ng password.
Nahingi pa rin ang password. Yes.
Opo. Wala pong audio niyan.
Ay, walang audio.
Walang audio.
Let's see. How come?
Yeah, Doc John, if you may increase na lang yung volume tapos piniplay mo siya kahit mahina na lang.
Let's, Sir Jonald, try natin ulit.
Sir,
Ayan, si
can
Ma'am.
Ayan
nag-message
po.
daw si Ma'am.
Yan.
Okay.
There.
Ayan.
Yan, Ma'am. Oh, young people. You can dance with it.
Taksangin mo, bantayan mo, huwag kayang lustayin ng mga politiko. Yang perang yan, pinaghirapan mo, susubo mo na lang, ninakaw pa sa'yo. Taksangin mo, bantayan mo, huwag kayang lustayin ng mga politiko. Yang perang yan, pinaghirapan mo, susubo mo na lang, ninakaw pa sa'yo. PhilHealth edukasyon, tunay na serbisyo, hindi mga ayuda pang bili ng boto. Ang mga infrastruktura dapat maginhawa, pero project sa paepal, mukha ang nakatapan. Confidential fund, pork barrel, ayuda, taksang ina mo, binulsa pa nila. Mamamatay ka na sa pagkakasakit, kailangan sa politiko, ikaw ay kakapit. Taksang ina mo, bantayan mo, huwag kayang lustayin ng mga politiko. Yung perang yan, pinaghirapan mo, susubo mo na lang, ninakaw pa sa'yo. Taksang ina mo, bantayan mo, huwag kayang lustayin ng mga politiko. Yung perang yan, pinaghirapan mo, susubo mo na lang, ninakaw pa sa'yo. Bata, di marunong magbasa. Ang mga politiko, gusto himangmang sila. Nang bobola, mambobola, naniniwala ka. Nakakapagod na, tama na ang dinastiya. Nasa Diyos ang awa, nasa tao ang gawa. Gawa ka ng gawa, pero bakit ka dukha? Palayain ang sarili, di ka magsisisi. Kailan ka giginhawa, ipaglaban ang hustisya. Taksangin mo, bantayan mo, huwag kayang lustayin ng mga politiko. Yang perang yan, pinaghirapan mo, susubo mo na lang, ninakaw pa sa'yo. Taksangin mo, bantayan mo, huwag kayang lustayin ng mga politiko. Yang perang yan, pinaghirapan mo, susubo mo na lang, ninakaw pa sa'yo.
Ay, ang mahal naman ng bilihin ngayon.
Ba naman ito? Ano na ang pamilya ko?
How am I gonna make this work? Taksangin mo, bantayan mo, huwag kayang lustayin ng mga politiko. Yang perang yan, pinaghirapan mo, susubo mo na lang, ninakaw pa sa'yo. Taksangin mo, bantayan mo, huwag kayang lustayin ng mga politiko. Yang perang yan, pinaghirapan mo, susubo mo na lang, ninakaw pa sa'yo.
Kagaya ng pinakaayos na edukasyon. Ito ay nilalagay sa ayuda. Nilalagay sa araw.
Susubo na lang, ninakaw pa sa'yo.
What's inside Erzavar Probiotics? Billions of
Okay. Thank you po. Laos Deus Semper. Salamat sa lahat.